Have you ever quit a job because your boss is toxic? Didn't quit was fired, though. It worked out great because I was done being there but was never going to quit. The problem wasn't a singular boss, it was management as a whole. Worked there for 2 years, and in that time span had 4 different team leaders, each one having a different idea of how to run things, but all being equally ignorant and assholes. We worked in a cabinet factory, and during the summer it obviously got pretty hot. We were told that whatever temp it was outside, that you could count on it being at least 10 degrees hotter inside. The area I worked in had a huge bay door that they kept open unless it was raining out. On the hotter days, the door being open didn't make a difference. It was just miserable, and we weren't allowed to have any fans in the area. One particular day was 105 outside, so of course basic math will tell you that it was at least 115 degrees inside. It was a Friday and everyone was already exhausted after a huge production week. The heat was so bad that we were having people pass out, and of course, according to management, we were behind our goal. We were being told to suck it up and work harder, that we needed to move faster, and finally a few of us in my area spoke up and told the team leader we were doing our best. This piece of crap decides to say, "Move faster or else," and we apparently didn't speed up to his liking, which led him to walk over to the bay door and close it completely. Now any chance of us getting an occasional breeze was gone, and it immediately started feeling much hotter. I told the team leader to open it back up, and he smiled and said, "I bet you wish you had done what I asked, huh?" I left the area and found one of the safety officials and asked her if he could do that, and she said, "No, that is definitely a safety hazard." She told him to open it back up with a threat to go to HR or something, and he opened it back up. I'm pretty sure that definitely put a target on my back. Story 2. At my first job, my boss would call me an idiot and say, "What the f*** are you doing when I got an order wrong?" Mind you, this is my first job and my second week at this job. I was also 18. I quit a year ago and I still get the occasional, "It would be nice to have a cashier. We are short-staffed." Text messages. Yeah, no. Shouldn't have been an asshole to me. I'd go home crying. I'd bust out in tears at work because I was terrified that I'd do something wrong and get yelled at. My coworkers had to defend me. I would work 10 to 13 hours with the guy. Story 3. I came extremely close to doing so. One of my bosses was often very irate when it came to work. She'd often insult me, even though I literally joined yesterday. I don't know how this crap works yet, but the other people I worked with were cool though, so I stayed. Eventually, she started to insult me a little bit less, but I won't lie. Part of the reason why we were understaffed was probably because of her attitude problem. Surprisingly enough, she was actually very nice and chill outside of work and on break. Story 4. I just gave my notice last week due to a toxic leader. I started packing up my office last week and it felt like I was walking out of a bad relationship. Pay was excellent, but not nearly enough to compensate for the crap. Story 5. Yes, literally walked out. I was overworked. I worked with incompetent person and the manager wouldn't do anything about it. I worked 6 days a week and no overtime pay. Once I was late and the douche cut my pay. I can deal with many crap, but don't mess with my coin. Story 6. Yes, many times. It was always very hypocritical of what they would do as a boss. The rules applied to workers, but didn't apply to themselves. I heard they eventually left the company, recently retail company, themselves, but many people walked out after I did because of how terrible the environment really was. As workers, we could have reported them to HR because of all of the nasty crap they've said to their own workers. But HR didn't care about no one but themselves. From the subreddit I follow for the company, people spoke about the laziness HR has when it comes to literally everything. If this job is giving you so much anxiety, I suggest trying to apply to places, even if you think you don't qualify. One of the nice tips I got from this subreddit was exact that tip. Even if you're halfway qualified or even underqualified, people still might give you a chance and might ask you to do an interview with them. I've never worked in a hospital setting before, but now I am. And it's all because I decided to apply for a position I felt like I barely met the requirements for. You might have to stay there a bit longer than expected because of this, if you cannot afford to be jobless for a while. But it is a good way to put yourself out there for other job opportunities to see. I hope things go well for you in the future. Also, pro tip, when applying for jobs, also look at reviews of the company to see if it's a good fit for you too. Indeed and Glassdoor reviews. That helped me separate the bad from the good. Story 7. I respectfully resigned, if that's such a thing. I'll paint the picture. Was recruited by an organization for a promising role, executive title, excellent pay. Except there was one catch. The hiring manager was a total POS. I should have seen the writing on the walls during the interview when she proceeded to go on power trips and start cursing for no reason. However, something the grass is always greener. Anyway, despite having been promised a great deal of autonomy in my role, I was nothing more than micromanaged from the very start. The hours were long, around 70 plus hours a week, plus late nights on Saturdays. My wife would call me wondering WTF I was. And after the second month mark, my manager started to sabotage me for reasons still unknown to this day. If I had to guess, she was previously in my role and didn't want me to outshine her, but It's just a guess. A good example of the sabotage was when I had a last-minute project thrown my way at 3 p.m. on a Friday that was due to the CEO by 5 p.m. that same day. Well, my hiring manager, who sent me the project to begin with, called me in for a staff meeting at 4 p.m. She ignored my pleas to hold the meeting later, and I ended up getting grilled by leadership for having the project into them late. This sort of pattern of sabotage happened quite a bit in my final month until I reached a boiling point. I planned to quit on a Friday, but that Friday actually went rather well. So I decided to hold off. Again, I had a high-paying job, and if I received the support I needed, could have done very well in. So I really wasn't looking to quit, and pushed off my decision till the following Monday. Well, Monday went somewhat okay as well, so I figured maybe my manager and I just had a bad spell. Well, a few days later, after I had my guard down, my hiring manager started a new habit of chewing me out in front of my colleagues and direct reports. Coming from the corporate space, I'd never dealt with this sort of behavior before, and at first I was a bit blown away. After that, I was just pissed. So after a few days of this crap, I decided I was done, if for no other reason than to protect what professional credibility I had left at this organization. One afternoon, after getting chewed out by my boss, I went to the printer, signed my printed resignation letter, scanned a photocopy of the letter by email to myself, the head of HR, my crap hiring manager, and her boss. I called the hiring manager and her boss into his office, handed them a copy of the letter, said, "Thanks, but no thanks," and walked out. Took a long time to mentally recover from that whole debacle. Best part, the organization is ranked a best place to work in one of those crap business or HR journals, magazines. I still don't have a full-time job several years later, but mentally, I'm in a much better place now, and fortunately, my wife is working full-time, so we're not homeless. It is tough to lose that six-figure income, though. Story 8. I left a job I otherwise loved. The hours were great, the location was great, my coworkers were mostly great, and the work was exactly in line with what I wanted to do at the time. My boss was the only deciding factor in leaving that job without notice. Verbally abusive, only ever coming after me even though I was new and trying my very best to learn as quickly as possible. She made what would have been an otherwise awesome job into the worst one I've ever had. I came into work scared every day and was more depressed than I ever had been in my life. She was also buddies with the head of HR, so I couldn't even say anything about the treatment without risk of retaliation. So I quit. I walked in one morning, handed in my typed resignation to HR, and walked out, and it was one of the best feelings I have ever had, knowing I never had to deal with her again. Story 9. This is the reason I left a job prior. My boss was horrible and was not concerned with developing her staff. She always questioned my decisions and my action, told me several times that I didn't deserve to be working there. And when I asked her to help develop me by training me her way, she would say no or literally could not do it herself, so she couldn't train. I asked for outside help from other members from other locations, and she would schedule them to come when I was the only manager on the floor, therefore not available to be trained. Or on a day I was off, stating that she would share the knowledge when I was back. I finally decided to leave and found a new job almost immediately. When I left, I wrote a pretty lengthy resignation letter which detailed the mental exhaustion I'd been under her rule and expressed how I could no longer work risking my mental health. I literally could not measure up to the expectations that someone else couldn't even set herself. Instead of staying for 2 weeks, HR asked if I wanted to leave right then and there. I said yes and left her scrambling. Something that would normally take me 3 days to do took her 2 weeks to do after I left. Former employees told me she was an absolute mess after I left, and she ended up transferring to a different store and then fired from the new store. It's worth it to leave. When I decided to leave, I had no job lined up. I had 2 days and a weekend off to apply everywhere. The following week back, I took 3 more days off because I was working one-on-one with her and I just couldn't. I took mental health sick days to go interview and was offered me a new role somewhere else. I went into work the one day I wasn't working with her and turned in my resignation letter, and when I came back 2 days later, HR and all the higher-ups had already read and passed it around, which is why they contacted me as soon as I had my next shift and asked if I wanted to just leave then and there. Story 10. I left my previous job because of the boss I had. The job was perfect otherwise. Great schedule, good salary, the work was interesting enough, I liked my other coworkers, etc. But I just couldn't tolerate another minute of working with that boss. It was detrimental to my mental health. I only lasted 9 months. My current boss is the complete opposite. He's the best boss I've ever had. I know I could earn more money or do more interesting work elsewhere, but it's really hard to feel any motivation to apply for another job when my current situation is so nice. Story 11. I have. He definitely has to be sexist because all the other women who worked with me, he treated the same. Keep looking and applying. It's not worth your mental health, your time, or worth the money to be working for a turd like her. Don't be afraid to leave either. Put in your 2 weeks if you want, and whenever your last day is, it is 100% your last day. Don't let her try to guilt you into staying. You are not owned by anyone. She can't come after you, and if she does, you can report and call cops for harassment. You got this. Story 12. Yes, I have, and it was the best thing ever. Do not stay in a toxic environment at all. It will drain you of everything and suck the life out of you even when you aren't working. I wish I left mine earlier. Please leave if you're in a toxic work environment. No job is worth it. Story 13. Absolutely I have. It's terrible when you are abused at work. I put up with that crap for a few years and then it became an actual medical problem. My anxiety was off the charts and I was having massive panic attacks all the time. My blood pressure was through the roof. My personal relationships suffered, and finally, I had a cardiologist, a GP, and a neurologist call me on a conference call while I was in session with the psychiatrist over this boss to in unison tell me could not go back to my job at all, like not even to quit because it was killing me. Stress can kill you, as it turns out. It causes all other crap to happen to your body. I quit over email. It caused me to completely change careers. Story 14. Just quit. Don't feel bad, not worth it. I just quit my job a month ago after 3 years. Similar reason. Would stay because I'd feel bad for being understaffed. But honestly, at the end, you need what's best for you. Money comes and goes, and with this market, there's plenty of jobs to try now. Story 15. Oh yes, for sure. Left a great job in my 20s because my boss was absolutely horrible. I complained about her to corporate, provided documentation. She was fired around 6 months later, but I'm still glad I left when I did. Mental health was going downhill fast. Story 16. Kind of. I've intentionally gotten myself fired because of a toxic boss. To me, it was highly beneficial to do it that way, and I recommend the same for most situations. Why? You get unemployment and severance if you're let go instead of quit. The company can't say anything bad about you, or they could be sued, so there's no consequences. On to the next job. You get to feel out boundaries and experiment with dominance. Instead of being a pushover, it's like office space. You can say and do what you want, and explore what you can get away with. You might end up very surprised with what happens. You might even get a promotion. I'm not kidding. You might get your boss to see the errors in their way and stop being toxic. Not likely, but it can happen. A lot of positive can happen here by simply not giving a duck. The only benefit you get by quitting is you can look for another job while working there, then switch over. This will make it easier to find another job, as you're more desirable looking for work while working, so there is that benefit. It comes down to if you want a break or not. A break can be a great way to take a class to grow while getting paid. Story 17. One of the best days of my life was when I got laid off due to COVID cutbacks and got paid to never see my toxic-ass boss again. It wasn't just her, though. The director also sucked. And 90% of my coworkers. They made every second of every day hell. I'd only been sticking it out because I needed the experience on my resume and didn't want to quit before being there a year. Story 18. This has happened to me before. Never trust your coworkers. They might be creating an environment that actually does not exist by manipulating you with words, exaggerating some past occurrence, and in the end, you'll be resigning and not them. Find out how she is treating you and how things are going on between you and her. It must be your reasons for you to leave, not because someone else had some experience. Story 19. I almost did once, but thankfully I had to go on leave for 3 months. Someone else took over my position, and I was placed at another location. But yeah, your boss can create a bad, toxic environment sometimes. My old boss would just scream if things didn't go her way or if she was too stressed. Story 20. I left a job at a boutique ad agency because my boss was incredibly disrespectful and toxic towards me. He had no idea about boundaries. Months later, 5 more of my coworkers also left. Prior to the pandemic, we'd all meet up for brunch and dish about all the horrible crap our boss did. Story 21. I live in Nashville and have worked as a personal assistant for a couple of different individuals. Both jobs lacked boundaries and were toxic and so anxiety-inducing. However, the last one was so awful that my doctor advised me to quit because of the toll it was taking on my mental, emotional, and physical health. One example, my girlfriend made reservations for my birthday at a very high-end restaurant where she paid $250 per person in advance for the experience. I told my boss this well in advance, and of course reminded her every day. I didn't need to take off, just needed to actually be off at 5 p.m. as scheduled, because the first course was being served at 5:30. 4:50 rolls around and she is in panic mode because she needs to email some documents to her realtor. So I show her how to attach a document and where to find them. She starts crying, saying that she has too many to send and she can't do it, and she can't believe I'm going to leave her like this. I tell her calmly again that it's a prepaid dinner, expensive, and it's my birthday, and that she's attached documents before she can handle this. Homegirl threw herself on top of her desk, saying, I don't want to do this. This is something you should do, and now you've shown me that I just can't count on you. I don't even know what to say about you right now. I have never had an assistant leave me when I ask them to do something. By this time, I'm slowly walking out of her home office towards the door. She picks up her pen holder and throws it at me. Pens everywhere. I literally didn't even react. I just walked out. I worked for her for 8 months, and it was a living nightmare. I have a cochlear implant that attaches via a magnet to my left ear, and sometimes I take it off because it gives me a headache. I can hear fine out of my right ear. But one day when I had it off, I didn't hear her ask me a question, and she said to me, "You need to put that ear thing back on your head. I can't stand it when you take it off because you just ignore me." I could go on, but yeah, I quit. Story 22. I quit a job because of toxic managers and coworkers. I worked there for a few months, but couldn't take their negativity every day. They were not happy people, always gossiped, talked about their sex lives, talked crap about the work, job, and had really nasty attitudes. Their bad attitudes stressed me out. One manager was such a nitpicker. She got mad that I moved the tip jar a few inches away from the register. It was in the way when I turned the iPad around. She even accused me of insubordination over it. I went home one night and quit via text. Never went back. You would think they would hire happier people at an ice cream shop. Never choose a job over your happiness. You can find a similar position elsewhere with a better working environment. Too much stress will make you sick eventually. Be careful. Story 23. Yes, I did. She makes use of my personal problems to blame the team missing the sales target on me. She actually had the audacity to ask me, "Why is your performance so bad lately? Is it because of your sick mom or your breakup? Are you still pining for that dude?" Neither. We missed our team target because it's unrealistic and the company is introducing cannibalistic products that affect our sales. We are stretched too thin and management refused to increase headcount. Plus, you're too conservative to try new strategies. But it's easier to blame it on me than talk to management, I guess. No shame in quitting a horrible boss. Start looking. Story 24. Can't tell you what to do, but the one time I quit a job without having another lined up, it was because of a toxic bullying boss. I was out of work for 6 months before I found another job at a place I love. It was a stressful time, but not half as bad as going into work. Story 25. I just put my 2 weeks in at a job I've loved for 6 years because of a manager doing the exact same thing. I feel like a weight is lifted, but I'm also upset that this manager destroyed what was an amazing place to work with her negative behavior. You have to take care of you at the end of the day and remember that you are worth more respect than what she gives you. Story 26. Honestly, my only regret was not realizing to quit like 5 years earlier PPL, who wait years and start having issues, then feel trapped masked by job security to get the paycheck or scared to explore new jobs that result in constant issues. Story 27. Yep, I quit a job because my boss kept triggering my PTSD. She played favorites, constantly micromanaged people. Nothing was ever good enough for her. People would be relieved when they arrived and saw that she wasn't there that day. Her behavior reminded me of my mother so much. Story 28. Yes, and toxic environment. After that, it's really difficult to recover mentally for the next job. I end up in the same situation over and over again, only to wish I was given time to fully heal. But because of financial, I need to find a job right away. Story 29. I was in a similar situation last year. I was in a position where I was making more money than I ever had before, had great benefits, worked remotely. Then, I started making mistakes in Excel and SQL reports for my area. Bear in mind that until then, I hadn't used Excel for anything beyond simple graphs and had never used SQL in my life, and suddenly was tasked with reporting data on demand for a $1 million area of the company with no training or support beyond using Google for help. The company VP accused me of destroying the company in an email thread with another colleague and looped in my supervisor, so everyone would know how much of a screw-up I was. I pushed back on that and was met with a 15-minute phone call where the VP ripped me a new one for being totally inappropriate, unprofessional, and making demands and threats. Then, in every single meeting after that, she questioned everything I did and corrected me in front of my peers. Not for doing things wrong necessarily, but not doing them the way she thought they should be done. In her eyes, I could not do anything right, and she made sure I and everyone else knew it. This stress triggered severe physical reactions to the point where I could barely eat or drink for 3 weeks. I lost 11 pounds in a month. I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk every day either crying or screaming in anger. I was convinced I was getting ulcers and got an upper endoscopy and colonoscopy. And I'm a fairly young guy, was 32 at the time. 3 months of this nonsense went by and I finally started looking for a new job. Ended up taking a job several steps backwards from where I was for less than half of what I was making before. When I put in my 2 weeks, along with a detailed explanation of why I was leaving and providing evidence of being bullied and mistreated, they fired me straight up. OP, no job is worth being treated horribly. Anxiety is nothing to mess with, especially since it can cause health problems way beyond panic attacks or constant stress worrying or whatever else comes in the moment. You are worth more than how you are being treated. I wouldn't quit without having a new job lined up. It's far too easy to storm out without a backup plan, and then you find yourself late on bills, facing eviction, etc., and end up in a much worse position than before. And then your anxiety quadruples. But there are options. Polish up your resume and go on Indeed and Zip, Recruiter, and see what else is out there. Even LinkedIn can provide opportunity. Even if you have to do what I and other commenters have done and take a few steps backwards, it's worth it. Money and career advancement aren't worth being abused for. Story 30. Quit my last job because of my boss and the owner of the company. They constantly harassed me, calling me on weekends and weeknights at 8:30 to 9 o'clock at night, and would get mad if I didn't answer. They would expect me to answer emails on weekends. If there was something wrong with our servers, they would expect us to have it fixed and reported right away, no matter the time. One time they went out at 3 a.m. and I woke up at 7 and found out. They were so pissed at me and said I need to get a ringer on my phone to alert me at any time of the night whenever this happened. It would happen about 3 days a week. They would test me by giving me an assignment, but it was a fake assignment, just to see how I reacted to doing the task. They would call me and tell me that I'll be traveling to another state for a customer site the day of travel, so I'd never get any warning. One time I had tickets to an event with my girlfriend and they called me saying they needed me to travel in 6 hours, and I said I couldn't. They called and yelled at me on the phone and were pissed until they coerced me into changing my plans and going on the trip. They had me working 11-hour days, not including my hour drive to work, and would give me a hard time if I took any breaks, except lunch. Lucky me. They would expect me to know something without ever seeing it in my life. And if I didn't do something correctly, would call me lazy and a drone. The CEO was a micromanager and would hover over my shoulder literally and watch me work. If he wasn't in the office or I was at a customer site, he would call me every hour to hour and a half asking what I'm doing. When I finally quit, my boss called me telling me I'm making a big mistake and that the company I'm going to won't make it, and that their company is the one that will win out. And no, I swear that none of what I said above was exaggerated. They had the audacity to then reduce my pay by 25% because of COVID and still treat me like this. I quit that job after 10 months and now have a way better job that makes me so happy. Sorry for the rant, had to get it off my chest. Story 31. I quit my job last year without another job, luckily accepted a new one a week after my last day because I had been interviewing, because my boss was toxic. I was having anxiety attacks daily because of her, and my mental health wasn't in a great place. I don't regret it, and I am so much happier now. Look for another job now, so you can get out of there. Story 32. Yes, the longer you stay, the more long-term damage will be done to your mental health. It doesn't just stop when you leave the job. It takes time to heal. So minimize the damage and start healing ASAP. Story 33. My first job was toxic beyond words. Excluding pay factors, I really do think that most people end up quitting their jobs and leave unhappily as a result of crafty bosses, poor management. Story 34. Absolutely. Quit a job a few years ago after working there for less than a year. My boss was a huge egomaniac who thought he was the best thing that ever happened to the industry. He was a smart and hard-working dude, but he criticized everything and constantly shut down ideas that weren't his. I realized after 6 months that despite loving the work and my coworkers, I just hated waking up in the morning and going into the office. Started looking for a job after that and got one within a couple months. Don't ruin your mental health because of a crap boss. Story 35. Point is, don't ever work in a toxic environment. Get the fuck out as soon as you realize there's something wrong. In my situation, I stuck it out years after I've seen the physical abuse addressed to the disabled girl. Because I stuck it out, I was left with a serious burnout that took a while to heal. Story 36. My last job. New manager and management came in and completely ruined the culture. My mental health is way more valuable to me than trying to get along with an asshole because of a job. Story 37. Pep Boys. My boss and supervisors had no issue calling me out in front of customers, telling the customers I was wrong because I can't read. It wasn't worth minimum wage. So once I successfully became a bus driver, I quit and they didn't like it. Since I'm a school bus driver, we go through unemployment for the summers only. I didn't receive it because my boss from there put I abandoned them despite me working my last 2 weeks. I would say leave. It isn't worth it sacrificing your dignity. Story 38. Start looking for other work. Disengage at work. Leave when you're ready. This is one of the main reasons most people leave a job. Not worth it and totally reasonable reason to leave. Story 39. I once left a job because the manager was unbearable and hadn't a clue how to lead. The whole team of hers left. I took another leadership role thousands of miles away. Fast forward a few years, I see her resume in the candidate pool for a job I was hiring for. I had her in to interview and her jaw dropped when she walked in the door. Apparently she didn't recognize my name, speaks to her character, because it was on her itinerary for the day. What an amazing moment that was. I literally laughed like an evil villain, and she slowly turned around and walked out. Story 40. Yes, the boss was an asshole, who wouldn't teach anything but expect you to know 100%. Also, he would work you like a dog but take all the credit to suck up to the corporate higher-ups. Because of course, it is his fantastic managerial skills that makes everything work. If the higher-ups were not happy, it would all be our fault, and we'd be called in and berated in front of the higher-ups, trying to prove that as a boss, it wasn't his fault, but all ours. Ugh, working that job made me hate people so much. I quit, but I still kind of hate people. Story 41, my job was toxic. It was a stupid call center job, and I couldn't catch on to the role at all. To make things worse, my boss was a controlling person whose explanations I couldn't figure out soon enough. He demanded yes or no responses, and I was afraid to say no because I couldn't express my thought pattern. I was so upset that I lied about being sick during COVID season to take an unscheduled PTO vacation out of state. I quit the job a few days after returning. Story 42. Oh yes, for sure. I felt exactly how you described. I know 7 out of 8 people quit their jobs because of her, but her boss didn't do anything about it. Her boss told me she had loads of people complain about her, and she hated that people felt bullied, etc. But she was her right-hand woman, so it was really difficult for her to deal with the situation. These people are excellent at kissing up, so it is pointless complaining. Better for your own sanity to leave. Story 43. Yep, it was a Walgreens overnight shift lead, which apparently meant that it was my fault that the store couldn't make its sales targets for that Christmas, when I spent the entire time working the shift by myself because they refused to hire anyone to work with me. The store manager was an Amazon flunky who had decided to run a Walgreens using Amazon's toxic and impossible leadership guideline. Story 44. Quit a job 2 months ago because my boss didn't give me clear job duties, pushed personal tasks on me, and would show up at my house unannounced. I worked from home. Pay was great and hours were great too, but she was just unbearable. Story 45. Yes, twice. Think about it. You're spending 40 hours or more around this person. Poor management or toxic work environment is most of the reason why people leave their job. Story 46. I've never quit a job because my boss was toxic, but I have purposefully stopped working hard at a job because their products sucked compared to the competitors. I wouldn't quit either. I kept working while collecting a very good salary, and I dragged that working charade on as long as I could, which eventually led to them firing. I could then collect unemployment because they fired me for a few months before finding another job. I ultimately ended up starting my own business. I knew I was just a number in this multi-million-dollar corporation, and they had such a well-known brand. Management was complacent and arrogant, even as their competition was leaving them behind technologically. So I used them just as they used me, because when you are just a number, you are easily replaceable. I didn't feel bad one bit about working for about 3 more months doing virtually nothing while they paid me. Incidentally, the division that I worked in eventually went under a few years later, and they sold it. Why? Because their products sucked, and they thought their brand would carry them. I knew their products were crap right from the start. The company's mentality was toxic. The arrogance was toxic. The entitlement was toxic. So I used them to my advantage as a toxic return volley. Story 47. That's the same as my previous job. I never had an environment that I absolutely hated except for my last job. My last job had a tech lead that was just so miserable to deal with, and my boss who didn't interface with me at all about anything and was more about playing face in politics than actually caring for his employees. To be fair though, he wasn't my original supervisor who hired me. I was just placed on his team. Similar to you, I had a tech lead whom I dreaded just thinking about interfacing with. I would dread going into work and hated the sight of his name coming up on my phone. I learned very quickly to refrain from giving my phone number out quickly from then on. He would call me on my days off or call me on every little thing, berate me in the quiet office where everyone could hear. It's very similar to your experience. I just found another rotation within the company. I kept up the face until I was able to rotate away from the team and join another department. I'd recommend the same. I would say play it safe until you literally can't anymore. I know it's difficult, but it's better to have a job than be jobless, but always assess your mental health and prioritize it first. If you honestly can't stand it, I wouldn't blame you leaving without anything lined up. Story 48. Yep, had an old job at a smaller company that got bought out by new owners who came in with big promises of pay raises, internal promotions, and generally better working conditions, and instead got rid of the manager everyone liked and put in an old Navy buddy of one of the owners, who promptly decided it was his job to whip the place into shape. After 3 paychecks where a specifically promised raise never came through, and several incidents where he claimed I hadn't done some task at work that the security cameras proved I had, with no apology or consequences for him after I provided evidence he was lying about me, I walked. When I had first started that job, I spent 3 years with another boss, who I can only describe as a malignant narcissist before she was fired. But after a month and a half of dealing with this guy, I walked. Best decision I ever made, honestly. I had to work a few other soulless temporary jobs for a while. but eventually found my way to my current one, which is a fantastic environment run by genuinely good people. It's a very weird sort of feeling. Thinking back to previous jobs, when you accept that a toxic environment is normal most of your life, it's a strange experience suddenly being in a healthy one where you're respected. Story 49, 100%. Working from home has made it harder to separate the normal stresses of work from home life. I used to love the feeling of going home and leaving the toxic energy at the door. But now the toxic energy is occupying space in my house rent-free. I had a boss who had narcissistic tendencies, and she would turn a calm team meeting into a screaming match because she refused to take accountability. My home office has so much tension in the room, from her tyrannic voice echoing off the walls. You can cut it with a knife. I wouldn't be surprised if my BP changes the moment I step into that room. Quitting wasn't easy, but it was very freeing. If it weren't for this pandemic causing mass teleworking, I would still be in the routine of going to work, dealing with the toxicity in the office, and coming home to my safe place. I understand that life is too short to put up with someone or something that doesn't serve you well. Story 50. I quit last year right before the pandemic hit because my manager was texting my ex and asking why I was taking off a sick day. Someone who didn't even work at my job. Sicko manager. I also found out my manager had been asking her about our private lives. I demanded to change locations, or else I just refused to work because I felt uncomfortable. My direct manager was communicating with my ex for such an inappropriate reason. HR warned me multiple times that they will fire me. I reasonably asked to change location. They refused. They fired for not coming in, just like I promised. HR coldly emailed me off-boarding, explaining I cannot get unemployment. I never laughed so hard and applied for unemployment. I wanted them to deny the claim after I gave my reason. Of course, the company backed down. I think I've gotten about $30,000 in UI because of disgustingly bad management since COVID. Story 51. Had a boss who was a major stickler at a gas station trying to vamp the place up like it was a grocery store. Our overnight guy had quit one day, and I got stuck doing the overnights and coming in 6 hours after that shift was over. So 10 to 6, then 12 to 10, I told him I physically couldn't do it. And to have someone cover my shift every time, he would tell me that there was no way anyone could cover it. So one day, while the district manager always backed my manager up no matter what, was there, I took my uniform and jacket laid in front of them, told them both to go duck themselves, flicked my name badge at the DM, hit him in the nose, and walked out. Went home and took a great nap and applied for other jobs after I woke up. Felt liberating. Don't follow my example of quitting, but sometimes you gotta do what's best for you. Best of Story 52. I was in a nursing home for 2 weeks. In that time I was there, the cracks begun to show very quickly. Staff were rude and just showed you up on the littlest things. I had met a supervisor once, and the whole day she treated me like rubbish. Not going to go into a lot of detail, but at the end of that shift, I threw my ID pass out and never went back. I'm fortunate enough to have shifts in the hospital, which I'm enjoying a lot better. Don't be pushed about for little money and catty staff. Story 53. Literally in the middle of this now. Transferring instead of quitting, but it's because of my boss. All the same. He operates like a teenage girl. Passive-aggressive comments, waiting until it's a big deal to address something you're doing wrong, treating you like crap one day, and then your best friend the next. Such a toxic environment that makes me anxious on a daily basis. So I said, duck it. I'm out. I'm not gonna live my life hating waking up in the morning to go to work. Story 54. I left my job close to the beginning of the pandemic. My boss was really nice, but the environment was toxic. When I asked for advice through text a few months before, she responded in an angry manner. I am almost done with my academics, but it was at that time that I realized I needed a more professional career. The people I work with and my boss are great, but I would prefer not to work in that environment anymore because it took a hit on my mental health at the end. Story 55. I've left several jobs due to toxic bosses. That said, you may want to try grouping together as a collective and report her to HR and her manager one last time. If you all do it, it will send a statement to the company that this one individual may lead to the whole team quitting. From a pure business mind perspective, it would financially make more sense to replace her than replace and train all of you. If this doesn't work, then for sure quit. Story 56. Had a boss who micromanages everything, can't control emotions, yells at staff, shouts at the cleaner, threatens the clients over a Zoom call, lies about almost everything to get what he wants, manipulative as hell, overworks and underpays his staff, has no friends and kept selling a fake dream to the new hires and expects you to work OT long hours on weekdays, last-minute work on weekends. And he wonders why the staff turnover is so high. Story 57. Yep, I quit from my last job because my team leader, supervisor, was absolutely horrible. She gave us NTEs for reports, tasks not assigned to us, didn't inform us of schedule changes, would pretend not to know of the new policies, but then reprimand us in front of other managers for failing to follow it. It was so stressful to work under her that half of the team resigned. We told HR about her behavior, but they did nothing except coach her. Story 58. I quit my last one because manager brought issues from home to work. He barely helped when I seeked for his help, knowledge. Instead pointed to Google it. And obviously I did. Anyways, I got written up because I couldn't finish projects because, like I said, I needed his help, but he didn't give. I became really anxious and stressed and knew I'd get fired. I was lucky to find a good job, and with 30% pay raise, I left, ducked that place. Story 59. Yes, in fact, I labored over doing so for months as I was working mental hours, weekends, trying to find a new job and raise a young boy. Ultimately, I waited too long to quit. When I quit, I was approached by someone senior who told me I was too experienced for the company to lose. I did not expect anything, so said I would stay if I got a 2-month break and a new job internally when I came back. 30 August. I start my leave. Story 60. Who's managing your department now? I'm not sure if it will work, but one of my big regrets was when a guy I knew was incompetent got promoted to a position over those of us who were actually qualified. Had the 3 other frontline managers, and I basically said if he's promoted, we are leaving, maybe things would have been different. Instead, they lost all 4 of us and then fired him for sleeping with an employee. Story 61. Yes, I have quit a job because the bosses were toxic. I wrote them a detailed email explaining how I feel because I had something lines up and knew I'd never need the reference, although I spent 2 years there. All of my colleagues had a great time reading the email and the response to it because we all unanimously agreed on the issues that were commonplace under their crap leadership. Story 62. I mean, of course. Why do you think people go back into their workplace just to shoot everyone in that, Karen? Supervisors are usually targeted. I left my old job as a bus operator because I couldn't take the disrespect anymore. I would have done something I would have regretted if I stayed, so I left and never looked back. Duck that place. Story 63. I not only quit because of a toxic boss, manipulative, abusive both physically and mentally, but I timed it before the store's annual inventory check. I adjusted her inventory by $22,000. A month after I left, corporate fired her. Revenge is a dish, best served cold. Story 64. Last job I quit was because of this. I was the best employee on our team. Then this boss comes in and wrote me up for little crap. I left and am now in a job that's a million times less stressful. So I really should thank them for being crap. Story 65. Not without securing another job first. But if it's causing you mental anguish or physical harm, then I would. Try to always something lined up. So start looking immediately. If not, I don't know what you're going through, so it's a judgment call. Story 66. Heck yeah, I have. He was so sexist. Didn't give a crap about my opinions and berated me for anything. This was in a minor accounting job. Grabbed my stuff from my desk and didn't come back after lunch. Story 67. Yes, we had a manager who had worked his way up in the one property and then moved to our property and was given an operational management role. He would hide in his office most of his shift and he only came out to get in the way. By getting in the way, I mean you could have 80 to 100 people sitting down eating in the bar and drinking, and another 100 in the restaurant, 1 bar for the hotel, and he would come in to help, which would be taking drinks off the bar counter for his orders, opening tables and not closing them, taking over your tables and not closing them out. He also had not one iota about service or food and beverage. He didn't know how to make a drinks list. He didn't understand how to account for waste in a bar, and he just assumed the staff were stealing, so he locked everything in cages. I had numerous run-ins with him, as did many others, and he even made female members of staff cry. One day I had enough. We were packed up to the rafters, music, cocktails, round after round of beers, and he comes in and asks for me. I was training 2 new female members of staff at the time, and there was 1 part-time person in the bar with them also who didn't know how to make cocktails, so I couldn't afford to leave the bar to talk. He starts chewing me out because he said, I don't want the blame for this. Earlier that day, we had a cameraman book in for a huge event later in the week. He ordered 2 to 3 drinks and a meal. When I had went to ask that manager what was the code for the cameraman, VIP people got an assigned code at check-in for tabs. He said, I will handle it. The only problem is that he went to talk to him, but he never closed off the table. And when my line manager went to clear it, it was in my name, so they chewed me out over it, and I told her that manager told me he would clear the table and to give him the bill. Well, I chewed him out and her in front of a packed bar and the other staff. I would have walked out there and then, but I couldn't leave those staff in there on that night. Never went back after that. Story 68. Yes and no. The first full-time job I had was not directly due to the owner. Small company, owner, her husband, still married but live in separate houses and seeing other people. Son, 1 truck driver, me running the warehouse, with half a dozen part-time high school students working under me, 1 full-time staff member running the store, and 1 part-time employee helping her. The owner was a great person. Her son never yelled at me. However, the owner and her son were constantly going at it, screaming at the top of their lungs at each other almost every day, the son also being perpetually drunk. The son would always try to give me orders directly going against what the owner wanted done. I couldn't deal with it. I quit, and every single employee that wasn't family quit within 1 month of me leaving. A whole lot of toxic between mother and son. Not directed to employees, but made things unpleasant for employees. Another job I quit was due to the owner screwing me over. Not toxic, but annoying. I was working in a kitchen in rural Quebec. I could barely speak French. None of my coworkers could speak English. The owner could, but chose not to when discussing pay issues, so I still don't understand exactly how my pay was working. I was working 80-hour weeks, only to find out that my pay was being withheld so they wouldn't have to pay overtime, pay me 44 hours a week, then continue paying me after my contract was over. So no time and a half, but in theory, I still get paid for hours worked. Did get some of that back pay after I left, but not enough. Because of the language barrier, I couldn't fight back. They took advantage of that. When the contract ended and they offered me a permanent position, I turned it down and got the duck out of there. I was a temporary employee, 2-month contract, stuck it out, but refused a permanent position, didn't really quit. Story 69. Oh boy, yes. I quit a job way back in October because my boss was an absolute tyrant. We'd have team meetings every morning about how poorly we were doing financially, and somehow that was our fault. We worked in a private clinic. He would charge people a dumb amount of money for treatments and then turn around and try to say we weren't making him enough money. The guy bought a brand new Range Rover in red in the midst of all this, and it was his daily driver. His dad, who was also the owner of the clinic, showed up with a brand new Mercedes on the exact same day. His dad also made the mistake of giving me his laptop to do work duties and forgot to close out Zillow, where he had a beach house picked out in Florida. They were ripping people off, buying expensive cars, and then had the audacity to try to make the success of the clinic the staff's responsibility. One of the marketing girls had a panic attack during a meeting because he was placing the blame of his failing business on her. Absolutely unethical behavior. Then our boss would walk around and do check-ins with all the staff, basically micromanaging everything we were doing. He would stop a patient's treatments because they weren't able to pay more than what they'd already paid for the first round, which was between $5,000 and $16,000. On top of all this, their whole scheme was treatments for peripheral neuropathy. I was the technician that administered the treatment. And when I tell you the results were anecdotal at best, I'm not exaggerating. Some people would pay $16,000 and end up with worse symptoms than the ones they had when they first came in. Ready for the cherry on top? The boss and his dad were both anti-vaxxer, anti-mask, Trump supporters, running a clinic for geriatric patients. Story 70. I had the same issue. I worked at a local coffee shop after a hard move and was struggling to adjust. The pay was incredible, weekly, and my coworkers were all super lovely. The issue I had was with the boss and manager. The owner had cursed at me and berated me in front of customers, then proceeded to gaslight me into saying it never happened. The manager made me cry because after a week and my first time ever working at a place like this, I wasn't moving fast enough. After a few weeks, I was a total rock star. But the treatment got worse and worse, and I was continually being yelled at by the owner specifically. He then made a mockery out of all the employees and did a whole public embarrassment against us that ended up going a bit viral in our town. Continuously degrading our little team of 5 and comparing us to his other stores, he ran saying we were the worst of the bunch. I finally had enough and quit without a notice, bringing in my uniform and not going back because I felt like I had had enough. I regret quitting because it was the best paying job I had, but for the crap owner and the constant stress I had to leave. Me and 2 others left on the same day as a coordinated attack. I miss making coffee in the funky little shop. The people were very nice and I had fun doing it. I hope those people's cups of coffee are full with the same amount of love as I had put into them. And the owner? Well, he can go stick a thumb right up his. Know your worth. Life sucks enough. Don't put your own happiness aside through something that is quintessential to living for the sake of living. That's what I've gathered in my measly 8 years of working. Story 71. I'm thinking about leaving due to my coworker harassing me every chance she gets. We have the same job level, but she thinks she's a manager, said so herself, and that no one can management her exact words. I even wrote about her asking if my hair's fake in one post, and now she asks every time I change my hair, real or fake, and she makes sure to ask in front of everybody too. She actually affects my day before it even starts. Like I dread going and stress out because of her micromanagement and all the yelling. Also, another thing she does that I absolutely hate is when she's trying to tell me what I need to do while I'm actually doing it. Like, what the heck? Can't you see I'm doing it before you open your mouth? You see first before you actually talk, Dumba. She also give me crap for sitting in my car before I clock in. I come extra 30 minutes early. My shift starts 4 a.m. And she also come 30 minutes early but goes into the building. And I always clock 3 minutes before my shift, and she always asks me, "Are you sleeping in your car? I saw you. Why are you in your car and not in the building?" And I explained I'm listening to music or on my phone not sleeping. It got to the point where she'll ask almost every day and I had to park somewhere else outside her view just so she wouldn't ask that stupid question. Story 72. I got laid off and was in between jobs. I was desperate and needed something. I took a job at a retail store. The managers seemed to hate me from the get-go. Why they hired me is beyond me. It was like they wanted a punching bag. The entire time I was there, it was hell on earth. I left many nights in tears. They made fun of me for being gay, and the manager was truly a horrible person. Coming from the finance industry where nothing like that would happen, I went to a retail store where I was harassed for being myself. I found a job as an analyst for a company in their finance division. They wanted me to start like in 1 week. My future boss contacted me via phone whilst on break. My boss at that time started screaming at me about something. I got in her face. It was at that moment she gulped and backed down. I said, "I quit." I walked out. She followed me out the store. I called the corporate office, telling them stories about what she did to me. The assistant manager was fired 4 months later for bullying. The supervisor was as well for not reporting it. The other assistant they couldn't prove was part of it. However, he was put on a final written warning. The store manager was as well. Her staff has the highest turnover rate, and they have to hire every few months. Story 73. Only you can make the call of what's best for you in your life and circumstances. In my view, you clearly need to leave. No one should wake up every morning and experience anxiety about going into work because you're forced to stew in a toxic environment all day. I personally left my last job 6 weeks ago for this exact reason, and I regret absolutely nothing. Now, ideally, you have something else lined up ahead of time so that there's a smoother financial transition and you don't have to go weeks without a paycheck. Maybe see if you can do some interviews before you put in your 2 weeks. Use up PTO and sick days if you have any saved up. Maximize what you're entitled to receive from this company if you have wiggle room and don't feel an urgent need to leave. In fact, maybe taking a day or two off could offer you some perspective. Whether you use the time to search for other jobs or just to note how you feel when you wake up and don't have to go to work, it may offer you some clarity. Try to remember that even if you love your self-job, there are others out there that can afford you the same opportunities without the toxic workplace baggage. And you deserve functionality and respect. Good luck. Story 74. Yes, I have. And I say just put in your 2 weeks, don't make it dramatic, don't talk about it or give advice to other works, and just move on. It's not worth wasting your time on and risking your mental health over. Chances are you could find work somewhere else. It's just hard to believe that right now. But that's why I'm going to say put in your 2 weeks after you figured all that out. You said she still isn't back for a couple weeks. So use that time to figure something out. Otherwise, you're just playing yourself. If thinking working anywhere else is worse and isn't worth grinding for, then do you really want to quit? If you leave, months will go by where you'll see from a distance, from the outside, that this place of work is still on the same loop. It's company culture. It doesn't change. You'll move on while others are stuck in the same place, but it just comes down to stuff like courage. If I had to guess, she already has talked crap on people who quit before in front of you, or something in this nature that might be holding you back. Do you really respect this lady more than yourself? Story 75. I left my toxic job last July after it was clear my boss was a COVID denier when he cut my hours just enough to where I didn't qualify for partial unemployment, turned off the hot water, and refused to wear a mask at the height of the pandemic, among many other reasons that built up to a breaking point. I was sick with anxiety constantly, breaking down crying in the bathroom, all of that good stuff. It took 6 months to see money from unemployment, and I struggled a bit, but it gave me motivation to figure out what I really wanted to do for a career. Now I'm enrolled in cosmetology school, starting in October, and on the path to being independently employed. No more toxic bosses if I can help it ever again. I'm so incredibly grateful that I left and decided to give myself better, but I'm also very lucky for how it ended up working out and recognize I could have really screwed myself. It's always going to be a risk, but know that you do deserve better and you'll never know what you could achieve if you don't shoot your shot. Story 76. If upper management refuses to do anything, then short of the threat of a lawsuit, which may not be an option for you, then even though you may love the job, your best choice may be to find another job. Hopefully one similar to it, but without the toxic management. Your health, both mental and spiritual, in addition to physical, is important. Jobs with toxic management tend to literally suck the life out of you. I can't say that I've ever had a job where I left solely because of a manager's toxicity, but it has absolutely been a contributing factor in several cases. In the past, I've faced harassment, bullying, and just good old plain incompetence. In some cases, the feeling of satisfaction when handing in my notice to a useless or toxic manager has been rather palpable. Have fun doing this without me from now on. I wish you the best in your search and ultimate decision. Life is too short, as they say. So do what's best for you. Story 77. Used to work for a small business like this. The boss was the owner, who was legit in all clinical sense of the word, a sociopath. It's a small company with 10 employees. In my tenure, 4 people quit on the spot after confrontations with her, in which she just started screaming insults at them. No notice, just said, "I quit," and walked off the job. She started telling one person how terrible they are and how they should just quit in a crowded restaurant after 2 others had quit and there was no way we'd get the work done if a 3rd person quit. I stuck it out the longest because it was a niche industry that is very hard to change jobs in. All 10 positions turned over 3 times in the 3 years I was there. I finally had enough and quit the industry altogether when the only person who stuck around for longer than 3 years in the company's history, was laid off and unlaid off within 12 hours due to an accounting error. Story 78. I've quit from just about all my jobs because of toxic management, boss, owner, family, and had nothing lined up. I've gotten jobs right away by the end of the week timeframe, and there have been times where I struggled. My plan B, if I'm truly low on money, is to find a temp staffing agency and put in some time while I look for something better. I found new and interesting opportunities that I never thought of, and I found a job where I'm happy. Management is very low-level toxic, that I find it funny because they, leads and supervisors, always want to do the opposite of KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I just go to my area at work and just get to work. No one comes and bugs me because they know I get a lot done and don't need to be watched or told what to do. They only come around when something unscheduled comes up that needs to get done. I do it and just go back to my routine. Story 79. Yep, I actually did this recently. I had been applying to other jobs for a little bit. The day I had gotten an interview and got the job on the spot, I actually ended up quitting when I was going to go in for my night audit shift. Spent since March being screamed at by trashy guests, overworked with no appreciation and lack of support from my manager when it came to troublesome long-term guests. I was done. What broke the camel's back was he decided to try to force me to sign a piece of paper saying I agree to not be paid 1.5 times for overtime. I walked out on that. Started my new job almost 2 weeks ago. Much better guests and coworkers. My advice, use this time to focus on job hunting. Use the time with her away to look for interviews. I recommend getting a new job lined up first before you quit, but also, you do what you absolutely have to. Story 80. I quit a job that a non-supervisor had a go at me at. I was working for 3 months, retail, with a work-related injury, and she shouted at me for not being able to carry boxes and asking for some help. I gave in my notice pretty quick after that. I wasn't a toler at that sort of thing. It was my first job, so maybe I was rash and definitely were conflict resolution methods to have used, but it was the right decision for me, even in hindsight 4 years later. You do know when it's time. If you can afford a few months without work, then quit. Otherwise, put your energy into making applications. You just need to work towards getting out. It's what situation you are currently in. Don't feel guilty about coworkers. They can move on too if they wish. You need to prioritize yourself and your mental health. Story 81. I worked at supermarket as a cashier, and my manager was a totally and cheap, also a thief of sort. So he gets the money to get clean supermarkets once a week, but he gives those tasks to us to clean the entire supermarket by ourselves. Mind you, I only worked there for 1 month, then I quit. That manager kept those money for himself and he would never show to supervise or to do any sort expediting. But it got worse after I quit. I kept in contact with the staff that worked there, and when the second lockdown was implemented, he proposed to the higher-ups that his employees should be compensated for traveling to work, as they would be essential workers, and also took that money for himself. Story 82. The problem with most corporations is they share the same tactics on how to manage people, and it always seems like the same type of asshole seems to rise to the top. I have a manager now that doesn't know how to say no to anything and micromanages everything I do, and I manage 30 people, so it gets old real quick that he's looking into everything I do. It's not just me, he does it to all my peers. I'm actively applying elsewhere. I was a top performer at my company and never had a bad review and get bonuses every year. I have thought about going on leave for mental health, but never got to that point. I can't wait to find a new company so I can drop the 2-week notice bomb. Story 83. It's time to communicate in a way these people and the higher-up that did nothing understand. Coordinate with your coworkers and do a walkout. If you're feeling generous, let the manager know that since you complained on XX date and nothing has been done, that you are severing employment effective. Put in the next day's date. Then have everyone sign and join it. What are they gonna do? Hire people to replace you all immediately? They're constantly complaining, no one wants to work anymore. Well, maybe if you took care of your employees, you wouldn't be having such a hard time of it. They deserve to feel the consequences of their actions. I'm not sorry. Story 84. I'm actually in the process of quitting right now because of toxic leadership and harassment. Gave a letter to our union representative with a list of the things I had seen and experienced with hopes that the people responsible will be dealt with, or at the very least, not advance to higher positions of power where they can make even more people miserable. My job is a federal military job, so I feel the stakes are a bit higher to address that work environment than it would be with a private company, but if you feel like it would improve the environment for your former coworkers, it may be worth writing something up and turning it into HR on your last day. Story 85. I quit Walmart in January because the ASM of department I was in was a seven-headed sea witch. Couldn't do it. I was so anxious and depressed. Coming home, dead tired, not wanting to spend time with my kids, single mom, or making dinner some night. She let go of 3 people in the same day. One while we were in the middle of dispensing orders at 5 p.m. rush. Let go of the people in total and didn't replace anyone and was cutting people's hours while we were significantly busier due to COVID. Just toxic. At her first meeting she had with the department, she was giving a speech about how she could feel negative energy. The Karen was the negative energy. Story 86. Yep, last company I left, my line manager was a bullying, micromanaging piece of crap. When I had my exit interview with the GM, my manager complained to the rest of the team when I wasn't back after 20 minutes, saying, "He can't be complaining about me that much, can he?" She knew she was an awful manager and that my major complaints would be about her, but she refused to change a single thing. About 10 months after I left, I heard she got demoted from manager to specialist. Same wage, etc., but no team management. In that 10 months after I left, 3 folk had left the team. It was a team of 4, including my line manager. Story 87. Oh yes. In 2014, boss was more interested in getting awards at her work than in the acute situation that was happening at her home. I worked in her home and took care of her paraplegic daughter, which was basically physical abuse from a male nurse working there, my colleague. One day, I saw the girl with bruises on her face, and I freaked out. Told my boss, her mother, that my colleague must have snapped at her, and she got angry as if I've offended her intelligence, denied that it was even a possibility. I guess the bruises were inflicted by angry birds that flew in through the window and assaulted the girl. Story 88. 10 years into a job. After 8 years in my old department, I transferred into a new one. They got a new manager after a year, and my boss for the last year has been an absolute nightmare. So much pettiness, needless fighting with everyone, but especially me. Belittling, gaslighting, and put-downs. It's actually killing me inside. I need to quit. I'm pretty sure I'm already on the way out, but I'm scared I won't land on my feet because this work is all I know. A few other managers and supervisors who like me are willing to give me a good reference, and it's a big name company, so hopefully I'll be okay. But yeah, what did your boss ever say in the office that caused you to resign? Story 1. You're just a pussy. Because I didn't turn my camera on while driving back to the office during my lunch break when he called me on Teams. I answered because I thought it was a work emergency. I'm in IT infrastructure. I quit that day. Story 2. He swore at me for taking a phone message for him when he was on another line. I didn't know he was awaiting that particular call. I threw my pencil at the wall and quit on the spot. He tried to dissuade me, but it was the last straw at a very crap job. Story 3. You are an overpaid machinist. I am a dual-ticketed tradesman that was hired for only one of my skilled trades. But since working there, I would move around the shop as jobs needed and help others. I would do whatever jobs needed to be done to keep the productivity moving. Instead of sitting around waiting for some other worker to finish his backlog of work, I'd jump in on an insured machine and finish what I needed to for my next job on my backlog. Yet the owner decided that I was taking too long to do some CNC machining and should just stick to my hired trade as a welder. He actually wanted the delay in schedule to charge the customers for more shop time. Story 4. Scored my dream job after college and joined a large equipment manufacturer. Think yellow paint. And after 4 years of building up my customer base, was starting to make decent money. New boss takes over, and after around 6 months says, "I'm making too much for my position." Immediately cut my base salary and gave half my territory to a rookie employee. Now I have to work twice as hard for half the money left 4 months later. Story 5. I was already working overtime that day, and when I got up to leave, my manager physically stood in front of me to block my way and asked if I was leaving. I said yes. She asked me if I finished all my work, and I said yes. Then she asked me if I asked any of my other teammates if they needed help. What? Anyway, I then asked my teammates, and they all said no. That was the last straw for me. Story 6. My boss blamed me for something that he told me to do while I was the only remote person on a Zoom call. He forgot I was in the room. The CEO was in the meeting, and he realized it and quickly said, "Because that's what you told him to do," i.e., he's on the call. I didn't quit on the spot, but it was one reason I left. It was such a trivial thing, there was absolutely no need to blame anybody. Made me realize if he felt the need to deflect onto me for something like that, there were other things he was talking about also. Story 7. I had a client that called in and threatened to hurt over voicemail. Said he was going to find me and hit me 3 times. Boss ignored it, found another job soon after. I had worked there for 12 years, and after I quit the crew, went to crap. Still haven't recovered fully after 3 years of me being gone. Feels good, Story 8. He accused me of being drunk on a Monday morning and forced me to blow his breath tester in front of my team after someone else told him I'd been drinking Sunday. I hadn't. So I blew 0 and then quit. If you want to do that, then do it politely behind closed doors. Don't disrespect me in front of my team. Story 9. It wasn't only because of this, but I had a minor emergency that was going to make me an hour late for work the next morning. Immediately, I emailed my boss to let her know. She responded telling me to take care of things, and I thanked her for her understanding. But when I got in the next morning, there was an email in my inbox calling me a no-call, no-show that morning and threatening disciplinary action. Her boss was copied on it. Once I got past my shock, I sent her my resignation. It had actually been sitting in my drafts for the last couple of days because I had already accepted a new job and was planning to wait a few more days to give my 2 weeks notice. She then immediately let me go with payout for my notice period, so I got a nice month of paid vacation before my new job started and never have to see her face again. Story 10. He kept telling me my job was so easy. I was a network engineer that got put in the engineering department under a guy that didn't know IT. I found another job and quit, and I heard he quickly learned that my job wasn't so easy and couldn't find a replacement because no one wanted to be the only network engineer. Story 11. You don't need to take time off to grieve at home alone. That won't help you. Better to stay at work and be distracted. Rather than taking the time off, I took a different job after that. Story 12. You need to exercise some critical thinking in this role. In response to me doing exactly what he told me to do, I did exactly what he told me to do because when I solved the issue with what he told me to do on the previous assignment, he told me I needed to stop taking liberties with the designs I give you. A strange game. The only winning move is not to play. Story 13. Years ago, a boss was like, sometimes you have to work Saturdays. To which I said, in my interview, I specifically asked if there was ever going to be weekend work, like on Saturdays, or the expectation to be there for that work, because I was told no by who hired me. Story 14. At my previous job, we generally worked 1 weekend a quarter, but a lot of it was unnecessary. Stuff my boss wanted for quarter end but wasn't required. I had a family wedding fall during one quarter end, and I gave my boss a year's notice that I was not available, since I'd be out of state. As we got closer to the date, a colleague left the team and she told me that she could no longer give E the weekend off. Joke's on her. I also found a new job, and my last day was right before Q-end, leaving her high and dry. Story 15. I once used all of the per diem I was granted for a week-long trip on a production gig. I returned to my office the following week to my boss explaining to me that I was technically stealing from the company by using my entire allowance of per diem because I was the only person on the crew that used all of it. Story 16. You're stupid was all I needed to hear. I responded with, I hope you feel better soon, as I wrote my timeout on my final timesheet. 2 months later, the boss's son called to say that his dad had died from a previously undiagnosed cancer. He said his dad regretted saying that and had wanted me to return, but just ran out of time. I wish he wouldn't have gone out that way, but I ended up with a job that pays 3 times more. Story 17. I caught COVID and became really sick. My relationship was on the rocks, and then my cat died. Needed some personal days for some of it. Came back, and that due to some performance issues, that's on me, I didn't mesh with the culture and what the company wanted, meant I was placed on a PIP. Once the PIP happened, I applied elsewhere, got an offer, and then handed in my resignation. A day later, you should be lucky because we are offering you a raise to stay. What? No thanks. I agreed to 2 weeks because it was the right thing to do, but ended up walking out 3 days later because my managers stopped signing documents with me and were completely ignoring me. Day, I walked out after someone refused again to sign documents with me, meaning I couldn't fulfill my job duties. The manager yelled at me, "Who authorized this?" I did. You can't keep me here. Been at this other company since. Story 18, not me. But our manager asked a coworker if everything was all right in front of everyone in our group IG cubicles because she had been in the bathroom for around 8 minutes. She silently packed up her stuff and left. Our company was cracking down on away for bathroom usage because a new hire would take his 15-minute break and then proceed to spend 30 minutes in the restroom after. He said it was a medical issue but refused to get a job accommodation, so the company cracked down on all bathroom usage, whether or not it may embarrass some employees. Story 19. When my boss pulled me into the office to tell me to stop being nice and that I need to put my foot down and say no and to stop helping others in our office. Literally, all I did was help a coworker look for some folders she needed that was super tucked away in our supply cabinet, and she did not like this coworker. So the fact that I helped this coworker really irked her because I got along with everybody and had no issues with anyone. I realized my boss was a bully who probably peaked in high school, and everything that occurred also made me realize how unprofessional she is, how racist she is, and the fact that she created a really hostile work environment. Story 20. That first I have to learn how to write before I start thinking about any career development path, because I'm still a junior with no experience. During a career development meeting, he told I had to schedule. Oh, and I was working at this position for 4 years at this point, 6 years of making a living from writing in total, with prior hands-on experience in the field I was writing about. Also, when I suggested during the same meeting that I could look after an intern, he laughed at it and responded, "First, you have to have skills before you start teaching anybody." I started applying for jobs the same day and got hired as a lead writer a few months later. Not bad for a junior with no skills. Story 21. Boss came into my office and asked that I falsify accounting records to make him look better at quarter end. I told him that I wouldn't break the law for anyone. I left at lunchtime and never went back. Story 22. Years ago, a boss screamed at me and called me useless. I very calmly said if I'm useless, then replace me, and went home. Begged for me to meet him for weeks for coffee and get me back, but I refused. Story 23. I came in early to finish the paperwork from the night before, which was still within company regulation. Manager asked me why it wasn't done the night before. I explained that a couple hours before the end of the shift, I got a call that a friend since grade school had been killed in an accident, and I kind of fell apart and didn't get the paperwork finished. My manager's reply was, "That's your excuse for having a crap night and not getting done? We have a job to do. Why are you even telling me that? Is there something you need from me?" Then they were shocked when I found another job and left. Story 24. I worked for a guy and I wanted to quit from day one, but the people who worked with and for me were great, so I stuck it out. After 4 years, we were doing a major renovation on the offices we were in, and the night before the work started, my boss, the contractor, architect, and me met, looked at a specific modification we were going to make to bring the building up to code, and all agreed. Contractor came in the next day and started just as we all agreed. My boss came in hours later and called me into his office and asked what the hell the contractor was doing. I explained he was doing the work the 4 of us agreed on the previous evening. He asked what I was taking about, and I looked at him and said, "Bill, this is the work we all agreed on." And his response was to yell, "You're thinking like a woman! You're thinking like a girl!" I'm a guy. I just turned, walked out of his office, and put in my notice the next day. Story 25. I resigned twice in the same company, just from different positions, and then worked elsewhere, within, from 2 different bosses. First boss was due to her validating a client's abuse towards me. I had been working with a client for years with a team of OTs, speech therapists, doctors, and behavioral therapists. We had a specific plan in place when she became abusive. I was at work one day and having a bad day with her. I had thrown out a piece of rubbish I found on the ground, which caused her to have a meltdown. This resulted in her cracking her head on the car window so many times she damaged her head in the window, clawing my face and spitting on me. As I had another client with me, I contacted my boss to come assist with the other client while I helped the other one. As my boss arrived, this client had grabbed a fistful of my hair and smashed my head into the window. So my boss told me to back off, and she went and bought that client ice cream. Second boss informed me that I couldn't take my time off at Christmas time, already approved, as they had overbooked on time off for other coworkers. She showed me the list, and everyone approved was her personal friend. One woman had been there a total of 3 months and was getting a month off over the Christmas period. So I left, wrote a letter to my boss, resigning and giving my 2 weeks. But I was able to use those 2 weeks in Bali with my mom as I went on stress leave. Never saw my ex-boss again. Story 26. He didn't say it in the office. He said it over the phone. I worked from home. He called me up angry that I had done something incorrectly, even though his instructions were vague. He called me a damn idiot. My wife, then girlfriend, suggested I took the day off to think through my option. The next day he called me, angry that he couldn't reach me the day before. I told him I had stopped working for me the moment he verbally abused me. He was apologetic, but I'd had enough. A short time later, he called me about returning the work computer to the office. He said he wouldn't be there because he was in hospital and had only been rude to me because he was in a lot of pain. I asked if he was okay. He said feebly, "No, not really." I felt bad because he must have cancer or something, but decided I still could not work for him. When I reached the office with the computer, I expressed my concern for his health. They just laughed at me. He's only gone in to have his hemorrhoids, the manipulative idiot. Story 27. After working a 60-hour week every week, I was 20 minutes late on a Friday morning due to traffic because a customer came in during that first 20 minutes and he had no idea how to help them. When I did make it in, he wanted to talk to me in his office. His days mostly consisted of taking customers to lunch, golf, or whatever the next excursion might be on the company's dime, while I ran the store, did the payroll, kept the inventory, ran the reports for corporate, handled the vendor contracts, and 98% of the operations of a national branch store. I go into his office and he proceeds to say, "We need to talk about your schedule. You need to be here from open to close." I said, "I agree. We do need to talk about my schedule. I'll not be working my schedule next week or in the near future because I'm done doing both of our jobs." I stood up, walked to my office, gathered my personal belongings, and left. That's not the end of the story, but that's the answer to the question. Story 28. If anyone doesn't like this business decision, I can get rid of them. Walks away, comes back 20 seconds later. Just to be clear, I was kidding. Walks away again, comes back a second time a minute later. Sorry, just to make sure I really was kidding. It was coming back a second time that convinced me they weren't kidding, but needed to cover their ass. Turns out, I didn't like the business decision, so I left rather than gamble on them telling the truth. This was a CEO with a PhD in psychology and a storied career in the military, so you'd think they had great leadership skills. Nope, wildest sociopath I ever worked with. Story 29. He essentially wanted to disrupt the company with an untested, unfounded, and super risky pivot. He asked for feedback after he pitched it. The whole room was silent because it was a stupid plan. I went first and calmly said, I don't think we should go all in and to do some research and test it first. He turned on me and screamed in front of the room, I am ducking sick of you and your negativity. I quit on the spot. People had flown in from overseas for that meeting and got up and left. Some dragged me to the side and begged me not to quit. I said, all of you have daughters. What would you do if your daughter's boss spoke to her like that? They went silent. I made him pay me $30,000 without any pushback. On the drive home, I called a business associate and they hired me straight away. He never implemented his idea plan. It's been 12 years and he has not been able to find a replacement for my senior and critical role that lasts more than 6 months. His company is doing half of what it was when I was there. Story 30. Chosen and sent by the CEO to do a 2-year-long college degree to upskill. Step down from management to do this course, voluntarily. New manager micromanages me and tells me they looked up my course online. They would have seen the names of the units only, and they are not going to let me take on the jobs I'm now qualified for and that I was previously doing unqualified, because they don't think it's worth the paper it is written on. I feel bad about having the business pay for the degree and leaving once it's finished, but the new major would only give me the most basic newbie tasks, refuse to acknowledge my 10 years of experience in the department or my 2 years in the role they now have. Story 31. Once had the owner of a company text me threateningly after I missed his call. When I call, you better answer, boy. I went home and sent him a chain email of all the memes I had been saving about how much I hated the job and him. Felt great. Story 32. I have had 2 bosses that took it upon themselves to cuss and raise their voice to me, never putting up with that. The only time reasonable to yell at someone is if they are doing something dangerous or destructive. Story 33. I'm currently looking for a new job after my boss promoted a low-performing coworker to my level and said it's important to promote those who deserve it. For the past 4 years, I've gone above and beyond to make sure our department finished audits and month-end closed. I work 10+ hours days while everyone else leaves in time. I'm in charge when my boss goes on 2-week vacations and volunteer my time for community events, but none of my contributions are promotion-worthy. So I stared, mirroring this newly promoted employee. He doesn't get any more of my time for free. Story 34. It was blackout time before Xmas Ache. He can't take off for any reason. My uncle died and I had to fly to his funeral. Not immediate family. Okay, guess you lost an employee instead. Story 35. She thinks I'm too nice in internal email replies. Hey boss, how would you want me to respond to this email? I don't know why you're bringing me this. Story 36. The second excuse as to why we weren't getting paid. Had a visceral reaction, going almost into shock. Had to hold on to the work counter to steady myself for a few minutes, and my coworker asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I finished the Christmas wreath I had just started, my swan song, if you will. The coolest and most expensive I'd made so far, and walked. It sold the next day in story 37. My boss turned in her notice and I was the assistant manager, so I was next in line to take over the role. He said he would never have another woman run his business again, so I gave him my 2 weeks notice on the spot. He then hired a man to run the hotel for minimum wage. Story 38. One of my coworkers started to feel sick on his lunch break. We worked in cubes that were spaced really far apart. He only had a couple hours left, and then he'd be off for 3 days. He clearly had a fever, but again, we were not close enough to interact with one another in any way. Our supervisor saw he was sick and went ballistic on the poor guy, like screaming at him like he was a really naughty 3-year-old. Why didn't he go home? He was going to get everyone sick. She was going to tail it home to her kids. I was so embarrassed for him and felt terrible for him. He was clearly powering through to save our short-staffed team. Should he have gone home? Yeah, maybe, but her reaction was so over the top it was unprofessional and uncalled for. The irony she was totally blind to was that she got in his face to yell at him when she could have just let him quietly finish his shift from her own desk 25 feet away. I started looking for a new job that day. If I could have afforded it, I'd have walked out. Hilariously, when another supervisor gave me a nasty stomach bug and I was laid up in bed for 3 days with a fever and could only get out of bed to puke, she called me out in front of our entire team for leaving the team high and dry for 3 days. I ripped her a new one in my exit interview. Story 39. You're just the best we can get. Everyone else is too lazy to work. Broke me, but I still gave 3 weeks notice. Imagine being told they would rather have all these people that they consider lazy instead of you. Story 40. When I was complaining about isolation in my team, I was told it was because I was the bully. I demanded to speak to HR. HR was not in that day. I resigned on the spot. Story 41. How long do you have? Here's a smattering. He always plays the gay card. About a queer employee who was being harassed for, you guessed it, being queer. You don't let me value add to your work. Because she was upset, I didn't need her input. Instead, she spent years correcting my punctuation incorrectly. You can't have the time off. It's too close to work event. After receiving a request for 2 weeks vacation that I was entitled to finish my final course for my master's degree, I had to wait until I quit to take the course. And my favorite, can't you come in for a few weeks to finish up your projects first? After being admitted to the hospital from emergency and being told I had to start treatment immediately. F you, Mary. Story 42. Didn't cause me to resign, but certainly set a lot of us to looking elsewhere, was when several of us developers got blamed for an update error caused by our manager who didn't put the correct set of code into the update. Then, in the Karen session that followed, the VP of the company said, I don't give a damn if it works or not, as long as it sells. They fired me shortly after. Not really sure why, but I was the most junior, and I'm pretty sure I was the scapegoat. Right after that, several others found other jobs. Not sure what eventually happened, but the company no longer exists. Story 43. COO sent an all-staff email where he described what my department did as really just typing on a computer. When we objected, the excuse was, oh, well, actually my EA wrote it, okay? And then sticking the text unaltered on the front page of the intranet, as opposed to all those other people whose office jobs were presumably accomplished by chopping down trees and machining car parts with their teeth or anything other than a keyboard and a screen. Story 44. My thumb was fractured and just came out of a cast. Still not fully healed, just clinically healed. I asked the supervisor, factory line work, that the pain was very severe and wished to change position so it would be easier on my hand. Foreman overheard and yelled, 18 at the time, at me saying, either got back to work or go quit. And I took off my glasses, put it on his head and said, okay, bye. Left on the spot. Story 45, I was a park ranger. Discussing a project with my boss, she says, look, I might listen to what the people under me say, but in the end, you're just gonna do what I want. The look on her face when I quit was chef's kiss. Story 46. I'd been at my company for 4 years, benched for 2 of them. A few days ago, my boss assigned a task to one of my juniors and told me that my only job was to arrange meetings for her, my junior. I quit a day later. Story 47. Was told in a meeting in front of whole sales team, sit down, no one cares about your opinion. I was gone by the end of the year. Only job in my professional career that I held for less than 4 years. Story 48. 1 year, a place I worked for announced at the start of the year that they managed to push forward with a bonus for us if we could achieve the company's metrics. We get some Japanese investors, the company wines and dines hard for about a week. They leave, and then we have another meeting about how even though we met all the company metrics, we didn't meet the goal for the bonus. I asked what the metrics were and how we failed. When I was told they'd have to look into it, right after the meeting, I found my manager and quit, citing the reason being the bonus. Story 49. She told me that it doesn't matter how hard I worked, and if I'm in this job for the money, I won't find it here. This is after I learned that my coworkers were making $15,000 more than or equal salary to me with less work experience. They were entry-level, and I'm years into the profession. And after they paid $20,000 severance to an exiting entry-level employee. I don't mind working through crap, but at least pay me like everyone else. I have my suspicions, but I can't prove why the difference in pay. I resigned very shortly after. Story 50. He made a huge error costing the company significantly. Then he told the president of the company that it was my mistake. The president wanted to talk with me and likely fire me, which obviously my boss couldn't allow to happen because the truth would come out. So he pretended to take accountability by saying the buck stops with him. So he should take one for the team and address it with me. What a guy. FYI, best thing to happen to me. Got a better job making almost twice the money. Story 51. Don't mind her, she's new. Stupid cow of a manager at Shoe Carnival in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, when I told a lady there wasn't a discount for her company in the system. So she asked for a manager. There actually wasn't a discount for that company in the system. It was also a busy week for the store because it was back-to-school sales. I left that condescending Karen of a manager at the register by herself with a line that went all the way to the back wall of the store. Bye, Karen. Story 52. Waiting to find another job. Said I couldn't spell. 2 times. Once in front of another employee and a third-party vendor. I asked her 2 times what was a misspelling. Said I lost my mind. Walked over to me. Said she liked my hair, but Her husband doesn't like nappy hair on anybody. Talked about her nappy head. Story 53. Because employee 2 just resigned, we need you to do their job in office. We will be removing you from your current field lead job. Our field sites make all the money for the company. I gave my 2 weeks notice that moment. A year later, 5 other people also left that team. Story 54. I heard her talking crap about me from across the office. I walked up to her and the folks she was talking to and said, "If you have something to say about me, please say it to my face." She said no. I put in my notice and maybe 3 days later. Story 55. It was a PIP that didn't make any sense. I didn't need them, so I gave my 2 weeks notice as soon as I thought I was ready. Not sure if it was days or weeks, but that was the reason I left. Story 56. A while back, I worked as an advisor for a care service who has recently had a bad inspection. I worked in person at the different properties across maybe a 15-mile area. My job basically was to clean up the mess and put everything back in place so they could carry on, but with improvements. After having to fire an employee for gross misconduct, I was then interrogated as to how I let this happen. Similar accusations were made toward me multiple times, the final of which was while I was on a Teams call with multiple external professionals, police, doctors, psychiatrists, etc. It was supposed to be my day off, but I joined the call anyway. The accusation was made that I facilitated and allowed something that happened before I worked there to happen. I had access to the company credit card also. Before the call had even ended, I paid for tracked shipping to return my work laptop, typed out my resignation notice, and printed it in the office remotely from my house. Ended the call, factory reset the laptop, and I never heard anything back from them. Until about 2 months later when the manager somehow found my personal phone number and called me begging me to come back because things had fallen apart since I left. The image of something printing in the office, a few people asking who printed it, and eventually someone getting up to see my resignation sat in the printer still tickles me to the day. Story 57. Didn't quite quit on the spot, but I made a comment to one of my 2 bosses that I knew would be the end of me. Felt good. Earlier in the day, I was taking a quick 15-minute afternoon break, talking on the phone with a friend. Suddenly, our IT guy is in my office, crawling around under all the desks and shelving, checking the phone jacks for whatever the duck. Owner of the company is standing in the doorway watching him scurry around on all fours. I'm obviously confused by what's going on, but I took a minute or so to finish my conversation and the IT guy is wrapping up. Owner asks me why I didn't end my call and help the IT guy. I say, help him do what? I was on a break talking to a friend. I wasn't part of whatever you two were doing here. Owner scowls at me and they leave. Later that evening is the holiday party. Everyone is making merry, enjoying the free meal, and this owner decides to let the whole company know I let him down and he's mad at me for not helping with whatever the hell was going on in my office earlier. He said something like, OP is on his best behavior tonight because he knows I'm mad at him. I'd had enough of this at this point, so I look at him and say, ha, are you kidding? I don't give a crap if you're mad at me. His smug grin shifted back to his scowl, and I just smiled at him. They let me go a few days later. That place was weird. Story 58. I had worked my ass off for 4 years building a department, processes, and developing a team. Got a new boss, and in our first one-on-one, he told me, the past does not matter, everyone has a fresh start with me. I know his intention was positive, but he basically said, the long hours and dedication I had displayed over the past 4 years, nothing. Story 59. Made fun of my skin color and weight. I'm super light-skinned, fit, and she was darker-skinned and thicker. She would make slick comments about my weight and skin color. And one day I told her over text that she made me feel uncomfortable and was highly inappropriate. I quit. I didn't bother giving her my 2 weeks. She didn't deserve that. Story 60. Manager humiliated me in front of my peers during a meeting with this bon mot. You better start doing a lot more claims or you will be shown the front door. I resigned the following Monday, 15 minutes before my shift started. Story 61. What color panties are you wearing? He was a total addict, and after his daily 10 a.m. break in the bathroom, I never knew what to expect. I got out of there as soon as I found another job. Story 62. I received a notification from our IT department that 2 employees were using the company messaging system to send each other dirty, explicit messages about their affair and escapades in the office. I was the office manager and second in charge of the facility. I took the transcripts to the facility manager and showed him, stating that our head office told me we needed to address the situation and put a stop to the messages and after-hours unauthorized use of the facility. The female in question was recently married, not to the male in the messages, very immature and narcissistic. The male was a junior buyer who worked with me and reported directly to me. I had been widowed 2 years prior to this and was raising 2 little boys on my own. The manager looked at everything and shrugged. Meh, I think you're just jealous. He was very serious. I was confused because at first I thought he was making a lame attempt at a joke, but no, he was totally serious. I was an 8-year employee, a decade or more older than the 2 people involved in the affair, and not even remotely concerned beyond the issues with them using the company equipment and facility for their affair. I was deeply insulted and told him so. I left his office, contacted an employment agency that had been headhunting me, and arranged an interview. 2 days later, I accepted a much higher position with an oil company at a much higher wage and excellent benefits. I handed in my resignation and was contacted by our division director shortly after. He was dumbfounded, so I told him exactly why and what. Immediately after, the facility manager came and apologized to me for his comments. He called the other two into his office and disciplined them. He gave her my position. Yup, I kid you not. I left feeling great about my decision and ended up having a wonderful career as an international buyer. The place I left closed its doors 18 months after being bought by their main competitor. Everyone was out of work. Story 63. I worked for a financial planner, and the boss came in one day and was making jokes about a client whose husband died from a heart attack. He was happy that the client had life insurance money that he could help her invest. He joked about people who have heart attacks, and it's always 3rd time's the charm. I said my dad died from a heart attack, and he asked how many he had before he passed. And I said just 1. He said, I guess it was 2nd time's the charm for me. That ducker said that like it was a joke. I was in shock and didn't say anything. I am a shy girl, and I was in my mid-20s at the time. I decided to leave at the point, but I wasn't going to quit until I had another job. I signed up with a lot of placement agencies and went to every damn interview and got a much better job. Once I gave my notice, the asshole tried to keep me by offering all sorts of perks, but I would not have stayed there even if he doubled or tripled my salary. I had put up with a lot of crap from the others in that office, and that was the last straw. I am proud of myself that I didn't just quit in the heat of the moment and actually got a better job before leaving. Story 64. I started from nothing at this place, and at the end, I was managing absolutely all aspects of the business, as my boss fired everyone because of COVID and kept only me and another guy, a driver. Boss never raised my salary properly for the duties I took on. Driver started giving me death threats because I told him off for ducking something up. Said he would gauge my eyes out and send my body back to my country in a casket. Told boss he didn't do a thing and said he wanted me to go back at working with that lunatic. So I asked, well, at least duck and give me a proper raise. He said, okay, but let's wait a month to see how things go between you two. And if it goes well, I will. I went back at working with that duck normally, swallowed my pride and hatred. A month passes, boss said. I must have misunderstood him. I went home and wrote my resignation letter on that day. Story 65. If you don't like it here, find something else, or any variation thereof. To the outside, I put on a semi-friendly face and act half embarrassed. To the inside, I say, sure thing, and start looking for a new job pronto. Story 66. Speaking to a customer, she told them I was skiving and pretending my computer wasn't working. The IT guy, crawling around under my desk, nearly had a concussion when he heard it. I just picked my bag up and ducked off. Story 67. He makes me too much money to let him go, pertaining to my repeated reporting that my coworker was abusing the dogs he was grooming, as well as playing religious podcasts openly in front of clients and coworkers. Story 68. Years back, the bank I worked for split management responsibilities. You had an assignment manager in charge of what work you were currently doing, and a people manager who did the HR stuff and career development, as well as finding assignment managers for you to work for. I was working on application support for one of the bank systems. We had 3 of us working on it full-time, with backup from the guys on the project team where needed. And of those 3, I was the one with a solid reputation as a guy who fixed problems. Of the other 2, one was new to working on the programming side and was a middling performer, and one was just flat out terrible. Couldn't solve problems, wouldn't communicate, just buried his head in the sand, and hoed stuff would go away, and was being managed out. The bank brought in a retention bonus scheme for key technical staff. I felt sure I was eligible. Nothing. Asked the assignment manager. He said he put me up for it. Yet the people manager blocked it. Asked the people manager. He said he thought I was a good case for getting it, but the assignment manager said no. Something did not compute. In fairness, the assignment manager was generally regarded as a ducking weasel, and the people manager was generally a good guy. And then the people manager showed me the email from the assignment manager, where he said not to put me in for the bonus. I did not resign on the spot. I did say in as many words that I'd be looking for another job, and I would be taking time off as needed for interviews. So I went out there, and in short order, I had a job offer from Bax with a nice bump in salary. That's the point where I handed in my resignation. Cue a conversation with the people manager who tells me that there's going to be a second round of retention bonuses, and he felt sure I would be included this time. And could I please tell him what salary Bax had offered, which I answered honestly, and got an immediate, we can match that. So, decision time. If I leave, I stick to my principles and deliver a pointed duck you to the assignment manager. But Bax were in North London, so it would be an extra 30 minutes each was on the commute, and on the Northern Line, the most crowded and unpleasant one on the London Underground. If I stay, I get the same salary, plus a bonus of about 4 months' salary, and to be honest, I liked working with the people there, apart from the assignment manager and the useless one, so I stayed. A few months after that, the assignment manager called us all into a meeting room to tell us he was leaving. You could just sense the unspoken, good ducking riddance. Don't let the door hit you in the arse on the way out, radiating off every member of the team. He wasn't the worst person I've worked for, but he's in the top 3 in a career spanning over 30 years. Story 69. My ex-boss was always late to the boat lift jobs in a really upscale lake community near where I live. It's a private little city. Anyways, everyone knows everyone, and homes are no less than 5 million, and everyone owns a dock for their expensive ski boats. Well, since he has most of all the lift business in this community, these people rely on him. So one day I was called into work a lift, and the customer was like this and that and the other about something I should have done the day before. I wasn't on call the day before. Well, as it turns out, my boss promised a huge $39,000 contract to be done the day before and used me as an excuse why it wasn't done, saying I was supposed to be there. What? They told me this. I didn't get paid enough for that crap. I walked the next day. But first, I clearly explained the situation and who they needed to get answers from. When you have a garage that has a turntable to turn your Ferrari around in so you don't have to back out, these people want results. Story 70. First, he said, I know you are overworked, doing much more than is expected of you. So we hired this new person to be a general help. Just ask her if you need to offload some work. A year later, he said, so we are restructuring. Initially, we were planning to put you as the manager of the financial planner and analyst department we are making. But X, who was to help me and who I trained, has 10 years more work experience. So she is the new head of the department. I did the work. I had the role for 5 years. I did it all alone. Now, a person who I had used like twice to update some Excel files I had built was my new boss. Duck number. Resigned the day after. Not only did I now lose the person who was to take some work from me so I didn't need to work 80-hour weeks, but she got promoted ahead of me. I had 7 years in total in the company while she has just shy of 2, and she did nothing above the ordinary. She was the office potatoes. Duck that story. 71. At a small ad agency I used to work at, I built all of the Google and Meta ad campaign. My boss, who mostly managed the always growing sales team, would occasionally pop his head into the fulfillment team room. We had a graphic designer, a social media content writer, a web developer, and a web designer. He would regularly tell us he didn't know what we did and wished we were unpaid interns. He said it was like living in a Sims game. On the sales floor, which was all cold callers, he said they all had green arrows pointing up because they made him money. He said our team was like we all had red arrows pointing down and we didn't do anything to make him money. Like, okay, we are the overworked team building and developing what you are selling. Can't believe that place is still in business. Story 72. I won't get into details, but there was one boss who routinely enjoyed berating the staff when he was having a bad day. For the most part, we tolerated it and shook our heads and did our thing. One day, though, he came up on me and started going off. A stare down. He was seriously off his nut about nothing. I told him flat out that he's out of line, and despite what he may think, he doesn't get to talk to me like that. He said he's the one paying, so he gets that privilege. So I told him, not anymore you don't, and noped right out there, leaving him to fill my spot because there was no one else to do it. Story 73. I had recently been out for 3 weeks getting a medically necessary hysterectomy. He did not touch the pile of work I left for him to review, and it was a domino of errors after that. He blamed me. He asked me if the doctors had removed part of my brain during my surgery, and then also threw out that I didn't even have ADHD and was just trying to get the substances. That was the worst of things he said to me, but only a drop in the bucket of other highly inappropriate barbs he threw over the 7+ years of me working for him. Story 74 was a retail job. Owner said he was paying me too much for the work I was doing. I was doing the work of 3 different positions. One I wasn't actually trained to do. I had also about 3 weeks before gone to him after finding out and catching on camera an employee stealing a few $100s a week that no one else had figured out or bothered to investigate. That day I left my keys with a coworker and never went back. Just ignored all their calls. Story 75. He had a conversation with myself and my manager about my performance. He talked for approximately 3 minutes about me directly to my manager without making eye contact with me once. I sincerely doubt he knew who I actually was. He might have, but made no effort to talk directly to me. He got fired a few months later for telling a man of African descent that his afro, that was meticulously groomed, was not professional attire. Story 76. Not to resign, but to quiet quit. It was a weird reporting line. I was the IT manager, but reporting to the CFO. We would always argue because he asked for things that aren't technically logical. Instead of telling me what he wants and leave me to figure out how to do it, he would tell me what to do. One time he said, "Am I not your manager? Just do what I say." And that shut me off, and I stopped arguing with him. Story 77. I'm not paying double rate for a mechanic to come out now. You are going to climb inside the oven and unjam the mechanism and get it baking again before lunch. The several hundred-degree rotating rack oven that had been running for 6 hours already. I did it. I was young and stupid. But then they didn't thank me. Story 78. My boss told me I was going to have a meeting with her and her own boss and refused to tell me what it was about. She then presented a list of every single mistake I had ever made in the year and a half I was there. I went to my car and sobbed, then finished my shift and never came back. Story 79. We can easily replace you with a contractor. Go on then, Mother Ducker. Do it. Spoilers, no they didn't, and it was 4 months before I was replaced. But the expectations didn't change, so the other guy in the team quit when he was expected to do double for those 4 months. Story 80. He told me that I was easily replaceable, so I said bet, and I got a new job that paid 4 times more, doing the same thing, and left about 3 weeks later. They did not replace me. Go figure, they couldn't find someone to do the job for peanuts and no health insurance. Story 81. You are lucky we hired you. No one else will. Hell no. I walked out, made a couple phone calls, had a new offer for more money within 10 minutes, and gave my resignation letter the next day. Story 82. What the duck am I paying you for? After I said I needed a little more time to think about my opinion on something that would ultimately make a huge impact on the business. Story 83. My boss told me they faced the same challenges when they started. So why the hell haven't they been addressed? I now realize this is normal, and I should have stayed. Story 84. I worked at a call center for a local ISP in the tech support department. There was 2 of us, and the other guy didn't know squat about tech support. This was during the early days of DSL, cable internet. About 8 weeks after I first started, they put out a call for a manager needed for the department. I decided that I didn't have enough experience yet to apply. Nobody was hired for 3 years. During this 3-year period, we hired and trained 5 total tech support staff. I was the one who did the interviews, trained them all, created the procedures, grew it into an actual department. Upper management decided to hire the other person who started with me without re-advertising the management job. The job went to his head really quickly. We had a rule in the call center that if you were going to call in sick, you should find your replacement for the day. I knew on a Sunday that I was going to be too sick to work on the Monday, so I arranged my replacement on the Sunday. I called in sick on the Monday. I come to work on the Tuesday and get called into a meeting with the new manager. He tried to get me to sign a warning for premeditated misconduct. I refused to sign. Upper management sent me home for the day because I refused to sign. So that night I updated my resume, spammed it out to over 100 plus tech jobs that same evening. I started getting phone calls almost immediately. I took the rest of the week off to do interviews. I went back to work on Friday with an offer in my pocket. I had a meeting with upper management, explained the whole situation. They understood the situation, but couldn't look bad by countermanding my manager. I took my lunch break, went to the new job, signed the job offer, walked back to my old job, told everybody who would listen what happened and who to look out for, and handed in my immediate resignation. They then scrambled to try and keep me by offering me a raise of $1 per hour. I explained that I had a new job offer already that doubled my whole income. A few weeks later, I headhunted one of the technicians that was very competent into my new company, doubled his pay too. I then heard that the new manager was so bad that another technician left 3 months later. 2 weeks after that, they fired the manager. I got a call from the company a few weeks after that and was offered the management job. I declined. Took them almost 3 years for the company to recover from the team loss. I'm still friends today with a bunch of employees who became managers and directors over the years, so I always kept an inside view of what happened. Story 85. Any number of things. The first, I worked on a test team for a large project. Since I was single, I was the one who was tapped to run all the overnight tests. So I worked 9 to 5 and then 8 p. 1 a.m. I did that for 4 months. Promotion time comes and my colleague, who works 9-5 3 days a week and 9-4 2 days a week because of childcare, got promoted. The basis for the promotion was my work. My supervisor lied to the director about who was doing the work. Went to the director and explained the whole thing. Nothing got done, so I resigned the following Monday after sending my explanation to the head of HR, the head of the division, and the person who ran the college recruitment program that had brought me in. Second time, it wasn't my boss, it was my boss's admin. We went for drinks and she spilled the beans that our company was almost out of money, that the latest attempt at fundraising was problematic. So I knew things were dicey. I started interviewing and quickly found a new job. I went in to resign, but before I could, my colleague told me he'd been laid off. I looked at my calendar and saw a new meeting with my boss that hadn't been there the night before. Kept my mouth shut and got my severance. Started the new job 2 weeks earlier than I had planned. A third time was about the technical strategy of the company. It was a large contractor that was trying to buy its way into relevance. They bought 3 smaller tech companies that were competitors in their space. Now, the reason they were competitors is they had adopted new machine learning methods for cyber protection. However, the large defense contractor wanted to demise that technology and move the acquired company's customer base onto their legacy rules-based approach. When I couldn't persuade them of their folly, I started looking around. The reason they were so adamant about the legacy tech approach was that it required a lot of consultancy, both to install and maintain it. The data-driven ML approach required far less manual intervention. They were afraid to lose the consulting dollars. Story 86. I worked for a telephone company that gave us 1 week of vacation and 3 sick days per year. The days were credited to us on January 1st of each year. One January, I developed a bad case of strep throat with a temp that hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and I missed 3 days of work. My supervisor called me into her office and handed me a write-up for abusing sick leave. I was stunned and asked her how I had abused my sick leave when I only used 3 days and had provided her with a doctor's excuse when I came in that day. According to her, just because the company gave us sick days, we weren't supposed to actually use it. That abusing sick leave like I had done was the equivalent of thumbing my nose at our employer. She handed me a pen to sign the write-up. I laid the pen on her desk, stood up, and very slowly ripped the write-up form down the middle while looking straight at her. I went back to my desk and started working, and she got on the phone with someone, probably her supervisor. I could hear her arguing a bit and then nothing. I fully expected her to tell me to get out, but she just stayed in her office with the door closed the rest of the day. I told my husband that night that I was quitting and why, so I wrote my letter of resignation and gave it to her the next day.